Good morning, dear students. So, in the last video, I have discussed about the importance of lesson plan, objectives of lesson plan, characteristics of lesson plan, and today in this video, I am going to tell you about lesson plan format for teaching of prose lesson. So, when you are going to teach a prose, so what are the things which you have to look after? So, I will tell you in this video. So, what is a prose? So prose is nothing but words in best order. So words which are compiled in a best order is called as prose. And do you know what is poetry? Best words in best order is called as poetry. So prose means words in best order. Poetry means best words in best order. And prose is meant for learning a language. Teaching of prose means teaching reading with comprehension. First the learners are taught the skill of reading and then they are trained to read with comprehension. So usually when the teacher is teaching a prose lesson, the teacher will concentrate on teaching of reading skill. Okay, so when the teacher makes them students to read and they will read with comprehension, then they will understand what is given in the prose, and then they will understand the theme, the moral values and everything which is present in the prose lesson. So teaching prose helps the learners to acquire more vocabulary. So when the students are learning prose, they will acquire more vocabularies. So new words will be there and teacher will give the meanings for the new words, and hence the students learn, or the students acquire more vocabulary from prose lesson. And teaching and learning of prose helps in developing the 4 fundamental language skills, which is listening, speaking, reading and writing. So in English we have 4 fundamental skills, basic skills, that is LSRW, that is nothing but listening, speaking, reading and writing. So when prose, so they will be developing their 4 language skills. And prose aims at intensive reading, giving more importance for the developing vocabulary, pronunciation, stress, intonation, etc. So the prose aims at intensive reading, and it gives importance to develop the vocabulary, and it gives importance to pronunciation, stress, intonation, etc. So when the teacher is teaching poetry, the thing what the students acquire from poetry is how to read, and reading with comprehension, vocabulary, and how to read with pronunciation, stress, etc. And also the students will learn the 4 basic skills, that which is listening, speaking, reading and writing. Next we will see the aims of teaching prose. So what the teacher is going to achieve when the teacher is teaching the prose lesson. So we will see one by one. The first one is to develop the ability to listen carefully. So the first and foremost skill which the teacher should develop is listening skill. So this teaching of prose will develop the ability to listen carefully. Why? Because the teacher will give model reading, loud reading, and the teacher will explain everything. So the students will listen to the teacher. So now automatically it will develop the ability to listen carefully, and to develop the ability to speak English, to develop the ability to read aloud and silent reading, to develop the skill of writing English correctly, and to develop the ability of reading prose intensively and extensively, to enrich vocabulary, to develop the habit of reading for pleasure and create interest in language, to acquire knowledge of grammar and make use of it in speech and writing, to acquire correct spelling and pronunciation, to have a love for English language. So these are the aims of teaching prose. So the teacher should achieve the aims like listening skill, speaking skill, reading skill and writing skill. And also there is one more thing, intensive reading and extensive reading. Intensive reading means reading in depth, extensive reading means reading in an outline way. And this teaching of prose will enrich the vocabulary among the students, and this teaching of prose will develop the habit of reading, as well as it gives pleasure and interest of towards the language. And this teaching of prose will acquire knowledge of grammar, and the students should make use of it in speech as well as in writing, to acquire correct spelling and pronunciation, to have a love for English language. When the students learn more and more prose, naturally they will develop the love for English language. So these are the aims of teaching a prose. Next we will see characteristics of prose. So what are the things which a prose will contain? So the prose contains philosophical ideas, social problems, historical descriptions of event, geographical concepts, and economic conditions of the society. So these are the things which a prose will contain. It will contain philosophical ideas. Philosophical ideas means some concrete ideas will be there in prose. The prose will deal about the social problems which is prevailing in the society, and the prose will contain some historical descriptions of event, like having some stories about some great personality, like if we have a lesson on Sachin Tendulkar in English textbook. We have a lesson on Sunita Williams in English textbook. So those are all some historical descriptions of event of some persons, and also we have some lessons about some national freedom fighters like Mahatma Gandhi. So like this, prose will contain some historical descriptions of, and also geographical concepts. Geographical concepts like we have some lessons based on the Himalayan mountain, oceans, and some rivers. So like this, some geographical concepts are also given in prose. And economic conditions of the society. So what are the conditions prevailing in the society? So these things a prose will contain. The prose will contain all the aspects of the society, and also some historical descriptions, and also some geographical concepts of the world. Okay, and prose is a most important aspects of literature. So among all literature, prose is one of the most important literature. Why? Because it develops the 4 language skills. Okay, and prose is the best means to preserve human knowledge, experience, imagination, ideas, and transmit to the new generation. So it is a preservation of knowledge. It is a preservation of knowledge. It is a preservation of experience, imagination, ideas. Through those things can be transmitted to the next generation only through prose. For example, why do we have a lesson about Sachin Tendulkar? So for the generation who are coming now, they does not know who is Sachin Tendulkar or who is Sunita Williams, and who are they, and what is their experience, what is their achievements. Those things should be transferred to the new generation people. So that's why such kind of lessons are kept in school textbooks. And prose is used to develop the cognitive and affective aspects of the student. So the student not only get the intellectual aspect, and also they will get some affective aspects among them. And prose develops the expressional ability of the students. So when the students are learning some prose, they will try to express, or they will try to give their own ideas in the class. So these are some of the characteristics of prose. Next, steps in teaching of prose. So what are the steps which we have to follow in teaching of a prose lesson? So we are following the Herbartian steps of lesson plan. In the next video I will say about the Herbartian step. Now this is the general or common steps which we have to follow while teaching a prose lesson. So the first one is testing the previous knowledge. Testing the previous knowledge is nothing but motivating the students. So you have to motivate the students, and obviously when you are motivating the students, that motivation part will test the previous knowledge of the student. So for example, when you are asking some questions which is related to the topic which you are going to teach, that will obviously test the previous knowledge of the students about the lesson which you are going to teach now. Okay, so the testing the previous knowledge is nothing but the motivational step. So you have to motivate your students by asking some questions, or by giving some information, or showing some teaching aids, or some by telling a story, whatever it is. So you have to motivate your students to check the previous knowledge of the student. And the next, after motivation, you have to announce the title. So you have to announce the title and write the title on the blackboard. So announcement of the topic will be the second step in teaching of prose. And the third one is model reading by the teacher. So the teacher should read the lesson for the students. Why? Because the lesson is a new one, and the students might not know the words which is present in the lesson, and it will be difficult for them to read. So the teacher has to give a model reading before asking the students to read. So after model reading, loud reading by the student should be there, and after loud reading by the student, the teacher should explain the difficult word and explain the paragraph which is given in the prose. So after model reading and loud reading, the teacher has to explain the lesson, and also while explaining, the teacher should discuss about the difficult words which is present in the paragraph with the help of blackboard or some teaching aids. And next is silent reading by the students. So after model reading by the teacher, loud reading by student, the next one is silent reading by the student. The teacher has to make the students to read silently to develop the comprehension ability of the students. So and after silent reading, comprehension questions. So the teacher should ask some questions to the students to check whether they have understood or not. And after that, recapitulation is nothing but review. So the teacher has to review the whole lesson by asking some questions or by citing some important points from the lesson. So and the last step is assignment. So after discussing all these things, the teacher has to give home assignment for the student so that they can go home and look back the lesson. So these are the steps which we have to follow while teaching the prose lesson. The first one is testing the previous knowledge, that is nothing but motivation. Motivation is the first step, and announcement of the topic, model reading by the teacher, loud reading by the student, explanation of difficult words and paragraph, reading silently by the students, comprehension questions, recapitulation or review, and home assignment. So these are the steps which we have to follow. Next we will see about the difference between prose and poetry. So there are so many differences between prose and poetry, and I have selected a few differences for you. Prose appeals to the head while poetry appeals to the heart. So prose will appeal to your head while poetry appeals to your heart. Means prose will deal about the cognitive and affective aspects. It will deal about both the cognitive and affective aspect, but poetry will only deal about the affective aspect. So prose will give you some knowledge, and poetry will give you some feelings, emotions. So when after learning a poetry, we have to feel the impact of the author. So what in what mood does the poet has written this poem, that mood we should have after reading that poetry. So that is what it appeals to the head, but poetry appeals to the heart. And prose appeals to the intellect only. Poetry is more powerful form of expression. It affects to the whole man. Will help in all forms like intellect, sensory organs and emotions, etc. So poetry will kindle the emotions of the learners. And prose is for mere information, whereas poetry is for sheer delight. So prose is only for information and poetry is for enjoying, delight. And prose is designed to improve the vocabulary, whereas poetry is thought to train the aesthetic sense. So prose is designed to improve the vocabulary, poetry is designed to train our aesthetic sense. Aesthetic sense means beauty. So we have to appreciate the beauty of the poet, beauty of the lines and beauty of the words which a poet has described in it. And teaching a prose lesson, the teacher concentrate on making the pupil grasp all lesson items such as vocabulary and structures. But while teaching a poem, the teacher need not to do it. The teacher aims at enabling the students to have a gentle understanding and appreciation. So when the teacher is teaching prose, the teacher will concentrate on vocabulary and structures. But when the teacher is teaching a poetry, the teacher will not concentrate on words and structures, but the teacher will concentrate on appreciating the poem. So the teacher will concentrate on the theme of the poem. The teacher will concentrate on the figures of speech used in this poem. So these are some of the differences between prose and poetry teaching. Okay. So today I have given you an outline about the steps about teaching of prose, characteristics of teaching of prose, aims of teaching of prose. So in the next video I will tell you about teaching of poetry. Thank you.